Okay, welcome back. Another edition of the Penn State Blitz. It's Penn State-Ohio State week. Two top 10 teams. Ohio State coach Ryan Day thinks it's an even matchup. Is it really? We're going to talk about the quarterback battle and how Sean Clifford and Justin Fields are linked. We're going to discuss Pat Freiermuth's future. And as always, we're going to end with the Penn State mailbag. Finally here, Penn State-Ohio State week. Ryan Day had his press conference. James Franklin had his press conference. Ohio State's unbeaten. Penn State's only got one loss. The spread is 18, and it might climb. During Ryan Day's press conference, he said this is the first time, really, I'm paraphrasing, the talent's been equal for Ohio State. He feels like they've been more talented than all the teams that they face. He doesn't think that's the case against James Franklin's Nittany Lions. I'm not sure I agree with that. How do you feel about that statement?
Happy Ohio State week to you, Bob. I did find it interesting, just to talk about the point spread for one more second, that Ohio State was a 17-point favorite against Cincinnati earlier this year.
Right.
And now it's a 17 or 18-point favorite against Penn State. I don't know if that's bookmakers maybe not being as high on the Lions as some other people are, or if that's just a belief that, as James Franklin keeps saying, Ohio State is one of the best teams he's ever watched on film since his time. I believe he's referring to being a head coach or maybe at Penn State. I'm not sure which. Either way, I don't think there's any way to argue with the fact that this is a team that could ultimately be talked about as one of the best, of this decade, of this, since the turn of the century. It has playmakers no matter where you try and stop it. Penn State does not have that. So is the talent equal on some levels? Yeah, I think so. But, you do the matchups each week, and there's not a lot of spots where Penn State can claim an advantage.
Right.
And so, you look at this game, and yes, Ohio State will be tested, I think, more than any other team it's faced this year, just because looking at some of the opponents, some teams that are pretty good, they just steamrolled. But as it turns out, this is just a really good team. No one's been within 24 points of it so far this year. Does Penn State change that on Saturday? I think it comes down to there's gaps, obviously, where Penn State's talent is a rung or two lower than Ohio State's. But as we know, any Saturday, you can even that just for a day. And can Penn State do that? They have some really former highly regarded recruits. They have some guys like Noah Cain and KJ Hamler who are, I think, obviously guys who could start at Ohio State, but will they both be 100% ready to go? We'll have to wait and see. So I don't know, I guess is the real it's not a talent equated game across the board, but it can be for this one Saturday.
Nice job of filibustering, number one. A couple of points. You're a betting savant. The line opened at 17. It did not come down. It went up. That tells me that the public kind of agrees with the opening line. Would you agree with that?
Yeah, and then it came, it started at 17, went to 18 and a half, dropped back down to 17 and a half. To me, it's going to get to 17 before it gets to 20 or 21. But yeah, I think people look at Penn State's secondary the last few games and just think, wow, if Minnesota and Indiana did that to Penn State, what is Justin Fields, J.K. Dobbins, K.J. Hill, what are these guys going to do to Penn State secondary if Indiana and Minnesota did that? Yeah,
that's a big thing for me, the way that they've played the last two games. I didn't think the pass defense has been very good at all the last 2 weeks.
I think you can make an argument it hasn't been good all year, going back to Pitt.
Yeah. Well, I think they faced a little bit better quarterback in the Minnesota quarterback. The Indiana quarterback, even not even really their best quarterback. Peyton Ramsey was kind of beaten out by the freshman. The freshman was hurt. That was a very close game. He threw for 371. I think that gave a lot of people pause. The other thing is, Chase Young is back.
Yeah.
I don't know what you would equate his value to the Ohio State team, but if you put him in the game, that's worth a couple of points for sure to the Ohio State defense. We're going to find out how good Penn State can really be. I'm just wondering if the toll of play of the October and November schedule has started to take a little bit of effect on Penn State. You got to go to Iowa. You got to play a Michigan team that's clearly improved, and they beat them. They got Michigan State at the right time, but Minnesota's a good team, and even Indiana's improved. Have to play them all, and a couple of them on the road. I would say this, Greg. I don't know, when I see them the last 2 weeks, and you might disagree, they don't look quite as fast as they were at the beginning of the year, especially on defense. The other thing is, there's been a couple of people that are their health is in question. Noah Kane, KJ Hamler. There's been a couple other people on offense. I don't know that they've really developed. I think the offensive line has maybe developed the best.
Yeah.
Some of the young running backs have developed. A couple receivers needed to step up from the way they began the year, and I don't think that's been the case.
No.
Dan Tashena is now starting.
Right.
Justin Shorter is not starting. I think that also has an impact on this offense.
Yeah, there's no doubt. I mean, you were expecting Shorter, or if not Shorter, Daniel George to be the guy that at this point of the season would be in that starting role. To have nothing against Dan Tashena, but he didn't go run track for a while and then come back to football for no reason. I mean, it just, he's really fast, but as the drop at Minnesota shows, he's not probably a guy you'd prefer. You'd prefer to have him almost like Penn State uses Jason Oweh, like a situational pass rusher. You'd prefer to have him as a situational guy you can run deep every now and again, but not starting, certainly. So, and then, in terms of the speed, I do think that we've heard James Franklin talk a lot about the stretch that they had. And it's not just because of trying to promote, them for better bowls or whatever. It is a fair point that, when they've played Ohio State in past years, they've had not easy schedules leading up to it, but I don't think you'd have to go back a ways to find a game. You were talking about it with Neil Rudell earlier this week from the Altoona Mirror, that you have to go back a ways to find when these two teams played this late in the season last.
Yeah.
And Penn State has certainly had the more brutal and more physical schedule leading up to this game than Ohio State has.
Absolutely. Let's move on to the quarterbacks. Penn State's Sean Clifford, Ohio State's Justin Fields, a former Penn State verbal, and at the time, a lot of people thought he might have been the top quarterback prospect in the country. Before we talk about both of them, I think we got to touch upon what Sean Clifford said this week about after the Minnesota game, which he didn't have his best day, threw 3 interceptions. They weren't all his fault. They lose the game 31-26. He throws the interception late in the game that seals Penn State's fate. He disclosed earlier this week he got a lot of nasty commentary on social media, I think, after that game, and he mentioned death threats.
Right.
It's a serious matter. I know a lot of Penn State fans know about this already as we talk about it. My question, though, I think the point I'm trying to make is, how distracting is it going to be for Sean Clifford this week to have to deal with this? Because when the Fox telecast comes on at noon, they're going to talk about it.
Yeah, no doubt. I mean, it was going across the ESPN bottom line earlier in the week, too, which caught me off guard a little bit. I was watching Maction, like I tend to do on Tuesday and Wednesday nights.
Betting savant. I said betting savant for a reason.
And I saw that pop across the bottom line. And, I don't envision it being a distraction for Penn State, but it's certainly not something you thought we'd be talking about at this point in time. It's sad we do have to talk about it. Penn State police acknowledged that they were aware of what was going on. James Franklin said on ESPN radio earlier this week that, it's a point, we're at a point in society where social media is driving a lot of this stuff and no one has an answer about how to stop it.
Yeah, and he said, you know what, we're 9-1, and you look at some of the commentary on social media, and you would never know that we're 9-1, right. and I think that's probably a pretty valid point as well. But as far as Clifford and Fields, you kind of almost have to say they're going to be linked, just because of the fact that, had Justin Fields not decommitted from Penn State, then he went to Georgia, didn't work out at Georgia, he comes to Ohio State. There was a scenario in which he would have been a Penn State Nittany Lion, and if he's a Penn State Nittany Lion, I don't think Sean Clifford is the starting quarterback. Sean Clifford is from Ohio, so this game means a lot to him. And also James Franklin, who doesn't usually talk about recruits that he's not able to land, was asked about Fields and whether or not it bothers him or it kind of hurts to kind of lose out on a kid when you think you have him. And he said, yeah, it does. It's a year-round commitment to recruiting, and when you feel good about a recruit and you develop a relationship on a recruit, and you spend all this time to kind of get him in Penn State's crosshairs, when he doesn't end up going to Penn State, he said it hurts. Was that a little bit refreshingly candid for you to hear that from Franklin?
It was, and part of me just wonders, I was thinking about this recently, but I think it might hurt more because James Franklin did everything with his staff to make sure Justin Fields stuck with Penn State.
Yeah.
And then if you read the story from Cleveland.com, it seems pretty clear that it wasn't James Franklin's fault that Justin Fields decommitted. It wasn't a fault of moving on. It was just the fact that they liked Joe Moorhead a lot.
Former OC.
Joe Moorhead left for Mississippi State. Obviously, Justin Fields wasn't going to follow him to Mississippi State, but they were worried about what kind of, what would happen if Moore had left. And that was a part of the reason that Fields decommitted, according to his mom. So I think it probably hurts Moore to know that they did all this work. And in the end, it doesn't even sound like it matters who or what Penn State would have hired or what they would have done once Moore had decided to leave, because it seems like the family maybe felt that they needed to be somewhere where a really good offensive mind was, and Penn State's offensive mind was Moorhead, and they thought he was going to leave for a head coaching job, what he did. So I think that might be just as painful as everything else. And then, of course, the fact that you don't just lose the kid, and you lose him to Georgia at the time, which you can live with because you're only going to see them in the college football playoffs. Then he transfers to Ohio State, it becomes even worse.
Yeah, and before we get to the halfway point of the Penn State Blitz here, I just have a funny feeling we're going to be talking about this again next year with Julian Fleming as an Ohio State Buckeye, which all signs say he's not going to decommit. He's going to sign with the Buckeyes. So that's a Pennsylvania kid that Penn State absolutely thought they had, a premier five-star talent that went to Ohio State. You pair him with Justin Fields next year if he plays right away, and I think that's also going to be a tough pill for James Franklin and his staff to swallow. Before we get to Pat Freiermuth, though, Greg, I believe you have some things you want to say.
Let's run it off. It's the Penn State Blitz podcast. You can get it every Wednesday if and only if you subscribe early. Apple, Spotify, wherever you get your podcast, you subscribe, you get it early.
I think you can find us on Apples, too.
Apples, yeah.
It's a new thing.
You can find us on the videos. If you're still watching the videos, youtube.com/allpennstate. We'll have coverage from Columbus, including you and Dave after the game.
Dave Jones back at his home state.
That's right.
Penn State fans love it when that happens.
It never comes up. Like, rate, subscribe, leave us some feedback, and you can always find the podcast and the videos on Penn Live each Thursday as well. So, let's keep moving.
We're going to roll on. Let's talk about Pat Freiermuth. Before we get to the real interesting news, I also find this a little bit fascinating. The John Mackey Award goes to the top tight end in the country. Pat Freiermuth, I believe, has 7 touchdown receptions, had a 3-touchdown game against Michigan State. Everyone knew about him at the start of the year because he played as a true freshman and played very well for Penn State. They cut their list to 8 tight ends. One tight end from the Big Ten made it. I think Purdue's Bryson Hopkins. I think that's his name. No Pat Freiermuth. How in the world is this possible?
I don't really know. I mean, I think you vote for some awards. I vote for the Blitnikoff Award, which is for the top receiver in the country.
Big shot.
I don't know about all that. But so the ways, and I'm not sure how the Mackey Award works, or the Burlsworth Trophy, which Jan Johnson was left off on, or the Ray Guy Award, which Blake Gillikin was left. And look, I think obviously, when these votes come down to the media, a lot of the times you are so invested in the team that you cover or the team that you see, and maybe the team that you're seeing that week, that you sometimes forget about what else is out there. But, to not have Pat Freiermuth, I thought James Franklin put it perfectly. If you would say one guy might be better than him, 3 guys might be better than him, I could probably, I don't know if I'd agree with it, but I could understand it. But to say there's 8 tight ends better than that guy, it just doesn't. There's no rational or logical explanation to besides that people that vote on that just screwed up and missed out.
Well, this guy right here has an all Big Ten vote, and I can tell you I will not be forgetting about Pat Freiermuth.
There you go.
That's my promise to you Penn State fans. The bigger news, though, there is actually bigger news. So, and you can talk a little bit about this because you covered Pat Freiermuth's recruitment very thoroughly. He is a second-year player. In most cases, you need to have 3 years of college football before you can become draft eligible. In this case, we're talking about the 2020 NFL draft. Pat is a second-year sophomore, did not have a redshirt year at Penn State. But here's the catch. Because of what he did during his prep days, he is actually draft eligible for the 2020 NFL draft if he so chooses to leave Penn State early. That is our understanding, and that's also Pat Freiermuth's understanding. Right. Greg, can you talk about what happened during his Massachusetts prep days that leaves him eligible?
Right, so he reclassified from 17 recruiting class to the 18 recruiting class, did a year of prep school. So he's been removed from college from high school for 3 years. So I thought Dane Brugger from The Athletic broke it down pretty well. He's going to have to explain the situation to the NFL. Most guys, when they petition for early entry, they just got to say, hey, I'm a junior or I'm a redshirt sophomore. I've been here 3 years. It's very cut and dry. This one's not cut and dry, but the math still adds up. So I think he'll be eligible if he so chooses to be. He's not going to talk about this, obviously, until...
Not even thinking about it right now. He was asked about it yesterday.
Well, and Saquon Barkley didn't either. Right. So, I respect the canned response.
A day later,
he's
with Jay-Z.
Right. Yeah. But it's a very interesting... I think thing for Pat Freiermuth to consider because he's very advanced for a second-year college player, but you do wonder what one more year would do for him. So I guess I'll just say this. There's a reason that Penn State has been so hot and heavy on the pursuit of Canadian four-star tight end Theo Johnson in the class of 2020.
Right.
He was supposed to decide this past Monday. He's now pushed that back into December. Is that good news, bad news for the Lions? There seems to be a mixed opinion of that out there. But either way, there's a reason they're trying to get him locked up. Because if Freiermuth leaves, or even if he doesn't, you're still looking at a pretty thin tight end depth chart as soon as 2021, if not as soon as 2020.
Tight end's one of the more physical positions, I think, in college football. You just look at what happened to Pat this year. I think he had a head issue coming out of one game. A couple of plays, he took some shots on the knee, and I was wondering maybe if he wouldn't get up. Remember what happened with Michigan and Jake Butt, who was an older player. Yeah. He played in the bowl game, tore his ACL. It's always a concern. Just be fascinating once the season's over and he starts to gather information and he becomes 100% eligible for the draft. If he at least asks the NFL advisory board for an evaluation, I think it's legit for him to consider leaving just because it doesn't look like he looks physically like he can play already at the next level. He's almost 260 pounds. We may be getting ahead of ourselves, but that's what we do. That's what we do in this day and age. Right. And we wanted to let the Penn State fans know about this. It's a very real possibility. Another very real possibility on this Penn State Blitz podcast and video is the Penn State mailbag. So we're in quarter number 4, and I'm going to count on you to bring us home.
Agree or disagree? Chase Young's a future top 10 NFL draft pick.
Agree. I would say top 3. And
that's not the question. I'll get to the question. Okay. Justin Fields, future top 10.
What is this, a syllogism? All right, yes, he is.
Justin Fields, future top 10 NFL draft pick.
Yes.
Okay, so Ohio State's 2 most impactful players are both future NFL draft picks, probably top 10 draft picks. Who needs to play more like a top 10 draft pick on Saturday for Penn State to have the best chance to win? Is it Yetur Gross-Matos or is it Sean Clifford?
I would say Sean Clifford, okay. just because this to me feels like a game where you're going to need to score a lot of points to keep up with Ohio State. Ohio State's going to get theirs. James Franklin all but said it at the Tuesday news conference. Indiana had put 27 up at Beaver Stadium. Michigan put 21 up at Beaver Stadium, and they made some mistakes or they could have had some more points. Mm-hmm. 2 years ago, a very good Penn State team lost at Ohio State with 38, and that wasn't enough. I don't see any way Penn State can win this game if they're not in the mid-30s. I just don't see it. Yeah. You look at how Ohio State's constructed. I don't see any real weaknesses on their offense. They have a very good offensive line. They have tremendous skill talent, and the RPOs with Fields. He's got 10 rushing touchdowns. Greg, he's only thrown 1 interception. Now you can argue that they haven't played a lot of guys. I mean, usually there's a tip ball or something. But to throw that many passes and only 1 interception, that means there's guys running wide open. Right. The running game, they got 2 really good runners along with Fields. For me, it's Clifford only because the only scenario I can see is if Penn State gets into the 30s to win the game.
Is James Franklin routinely, he's brought it up now at least twice this week, and it could be at least 3 or 4 by the time we actually get to game day. He's bringing up this point that Ohio State's going to get theirs and Penn State has to counterpunch and make it like a heavyweight fight. Is he setting it up for, Penn State, it's kind of softening the blow a little bit? Or is his message to the team more about if we don't respond well to Ohio State's big plays, we have no chance?
I think he looks at the game and he knows there's some matchups that are heavily in Ohio State's favor. I think the Ohio State passing game, even though they haven't really needed it because they've run the ball so well, if they want to do some things either off of play action or an RPO, I think Penn State's secondary has not held up well the last 2 weeks against less talented offensive attacks. So I think he's kind of prepping them for adversity because he knows there's going to be some, and he does not want them to get discouraged if they're down. If they're down, 21-7 midway through the second quarter, he's already talked to them about, hey, we've been with this team. We've had double-digit leads. We played with him to the very end the last 2 years. We won 3 years ago. It's going to be one of those games. They came back against us. They didn't get discouraged. We can't get discouraged we can't get discouraged either. So I think that he's trying to build that mindset because I think there is a very real possibility that Penn State could find itself down double digits in the first half. You know, they were able to overcome a lot of adversity at Minnesota. They actually had a chance to win the game. I think they were down 11 at halftime. Yep. It was a struggle. They lost a turnover battle. And at the end of the game, they overcame some adversity. They had a chance to win the game. I think he's trying to set that scenario up for Penn State, again, on the road in a tougher environment against a much tougher team.
Final question. What's more likely, Justin Shorter to have over or under? Let's go with over, no under. Over 3.5. It's more likely for Justin Shorter to have over 3.5 receptions.
In this game.
Yep. Or Noah Cain to have over 17 carries. Which is more likely?
Boy, I mean, I expected Noah Cain to play last week, Greg.
We expected him to play at Minnesota too. Yeah.
But reading between the lines, it sounds like he was not able to practice. And as a freshman, James was not going to cut him enough slack with the other freshmen who he's trying to keep happy and the other younger players practicing. If he's not going to play now, he's never going to. I mean, you know, right. we can't save him for Rutgers. Like, what's the point?
How dare you talk about the Scarlet Knights like that?
If he plays, I'm going to go under 17 carries, but double-digit carries. How's that?
And what about Shorter? 3.5 catches?
No chance.
Okay, there you have it. We will be back on the Penn Live Penn State Blitz podcast with picks and predictions. Or if you're watching the video, we'll do video number 2. That's at Penn Live or YouTube.com/all Penn State.
Nice catch.